I had never felt fear like that, at that time at least. I couldn't even move at first, but my muscles were tight, ready to react. I heard every creak of the house, gust of wind, and the tree frogs chirping through the cool night air. Most of all, I heard my own heart. It was deafening. I glanced to my right at the fireplace, and quickly armed myself with the fire poker. Too fearful to take my eyes off the door, I didn't even consider going back for my phone or my car keys. As I inched closer, there was a creak of a wooden floorboard. To this day, I'm not sure if it was the one I stepped on, or if it came from the part of the porch I couldn't see. When I finally got to the door, I quickly flipped the porch light on, and in one fluid motion jumped out the door, weapon raised, and let out a guttural scream as my eyes darted quickly down both sides of the porch and then scanned the yard. There was nothing there, beyond that which caught my attention in the first place. On the porch, where the welcome mat used to be just in front of the door, was a circle. It seemed to be a perfect circle, about 2 feet in diameter. It was bugs. All different bugs, most of them dead, all laid out in a perfect circle. There were snails, beetles, spiders, June bugs, etc. There was one that was still alive, a moth, with one wing and its feelers the only thing still moving, trying to get away. For some reason, I was entranced by this moth. I couldn't look away from it as I watched it suffer and slowly die. My trance was almost broken by a shrill, piercing noise ringing my ears. It didn't even faze me. I wish I knew why, but I just couldn't look away. At some point, I just remember thinking that it needed to go ahead and die. Just as the thought hit me, the moth stopped moving, and the noise stopped. I realized I'd been standing on the porch watching that moth for several minutes, and I was suddenly aware of my surroundings again. Goosebumps traveled down each of my extremities, and the feeling of eyes on me came back, stronger than ever. "Stay the fuck off my property or you will be shot. I'm not fucking with you," I called out. I went back inside and closed the door, locking the knob of the deadbolt and the chain this time, just to be sure. I then rechecked all the windows and the back door. The last window I checked was the one closest to the front door. As I inspected the lock and tested the windows, I glanced through it back down at the porch. What I saw assured me I was losing my shit, or dreaming. The bugs were gone. The next morning I woke to the sounds of birds chirping. It was nice, and if I'm honest, I briefly all but forgotten about the night before. I barely slept after the bugs, but what little sleep I had was still less than satisfying. The whole time I had strange dreams of trees moving around and hiding behind each other, and of animals congregating in a clearing, smashing into each other and blending into a mass of flesh, fur, scale, and feathers. And all the while I could hear whispers and laughs and cries, all while experiencing the same terrible anxiety that compelled me to stay. I want to stress this to all of you now. I know everyone is wondering why I didn't just leave after the first night, but this anxiety kept me there. I can't explain it whatsoever, but at the time, and even later on, I simply couldn't leave. Despite everything that happened, the idea of not going away scared me more than anything. It was as if my soul had grown roots into the very walls of the cabin. Hell, even the idea of a trip to the store had me stressed out. Anyway, I finally got up and around and showered, then had a shitload of coffee. I figured that the day would be better spent staying busy, so I explored the cabin. Among a shelf of DVDs and books, I found another key just sitting there. I finally found what it went to after going outside. On the eastern wall of the cabin's exterior was a tool shed of sorts. It was mostly empty, save for some regular hand tools, leftover lumber, and to my surprise, an old shotgun and some shells. What a find! My fear just fell to a reasonable level now that I had a decent weapon. It's true what they say about guns providing peace of mind. I decided to load up the shotgun and head out and about. I walked around the tree line of the yard, peering into the woods, looking for tracks and broken branches. Eventually, I made it to the back of the side of the house over by the overgrown trail. I looked around the yard and past the trees, making sure there was nothing there. Sure enough, I couldn't see anything. At this point, I was certain that I was going crazy. The more I thought about the night before, the more I wanted to laugh at myself for thinking there were people in the yard. The memory of it was so hazy. It was like a fever dream or something. It was probably a dream or some hallucination caused from my lack of sleep. At least that's what I told myself. As the coffee wore off, I decided to lay down for a nap, hoping to catch up on some of the sleep I had missed out on the night before. I slept for maybe an hour before I was thrown awake in a sheer panic, to a barrage of different sounds coming from the cabin. Through the cracked door, I could see that the TV was on. I walked to the main room of the cabin and everything was turned on. The computer was open to a music player with the speakers turned all the way up. The TV was on some crappy soap opera, volume at max as well. Every lamp, light, ceiling fan, and kitchen appliance was on. The noise was overwhelming, and I scrambled to turn everything off. All I could think was, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Then the entire time I was stumbling around. I started in the kitchen and worked my way into the living room. The last and loudest thing I had got to was the television. I turned it down to a reasonable volume and then I realized I had missed something in the kitchen. It didn't sound like an appliance or anything, though. It was a dull, muffled knocking noise. I searched all over the kitchen, checking every appliance and looking into every cabinet, when I realized the noise was on the other side of the cabin wall. I began to tremble again. It was steady, but it wasn't a pattern. It sounded like someone was just tapping the wall out there. I quickly grabbed the shotgun and put on my shoes. I didn't even bother lacing them up. As fast and as quietly as I could, I crept to the front door and tiptoed around the west side of the house. As I slowly moved along the exterior wall, I began hearing whispers again. One distinct voice was ahead of me, around the corner where the smacking sound was coming from. The other voices were coming from the woods, exchanging panicked spurts of conversation and hushing each other. I scanned the tree line with careful eyes. There was nothing there. No eyes, no shadows, no silhouettes, just green foliage and brown tree trunks. As I rounded the corner, all the whispers stopped and the trees began to shake as if the wind began to rage. I felt no breeze, but I caught a serious chill nonetheless. I found the source of the banging and immediately trained my gun on it. Darting around, I had hoped to catch a glimpse of someone running away. Even with the benefit of sunlight, I saw nobody yet again. I looked back down on what was making that noise. It was a bird, a robin, I think, just writhing up against the wall. It was trying to flap its wings and stand up, trying to get up and fly. Every time it did, it slammed up against the wall of the cabin and fell back into the grass. Its head flopped around lifelessly on its obviously shattered neck, blood leaking from its beak. I'm not sure why, but I immediately began stomping it into the ground. I stomped and stomped until there was nothing more than gore and feathers laying in the indentation I made in the ground. This is when I realized that I was standing in another circle. Only this time, instead of bugs, the circle was made up of birds, frogs, squirrels, small fish, and other similarly sized animals, all of them dead, with the robin being the last one alive. The circle was about 4 feet in diameter, and I was right in the middle of it. The slightly overgrown grass concealed them as I walked up, but now I see them clear as day. Then the whispers were back, growing louder, only now they were coming from the east side of the house. I ran around the back porch, gun aimed at the tree line. The bushes and branches began to move and shake as if something was crawling through them. As I approached the east corner of the house, I fired a shot into the trees. The movement didn't stop and the voices only got louder. I began hearing footsteps again, just like the first night in the woods. They were all around the cabin now, but the loudest in the back near the trail. I fired another shot towards the trail and screamed out, "Quit fucking with me! I don't care who you are, I'll hunt you through these fucking woods and put a round in every one of you!" I felt like I was at my wit's end. Whoever or whatever was in those woods obviously wasn't spooked by the crack of a shotgun, but were maybe scared to leave the trees. For a second, I just wanted to run. I wanted to get in my car and go, but what scared me more than whatever was watching me in the trees was that I kept telling myself that I couldn't go. Looking back, that was the worst part of it. No matter how scared I got, my mind was locked in that fucking cabin. I started inching my way up the east wall of the house, refusing to take my aim off of the trees. Suddenly, I tripped and fell flat on my ass. I got up quickly and put my gun right back on the tree line. I glanced down to see what caused me to stumble, and immediately felt ill. The urge to vomit was overbearing. It was yet another ring, this one 6 feet in diameter. This ring was comprised of cats, smaller dogs, raccoons, possums, large catfish, rabbits, and other animals. The stillness of their bodies and their vacant eyes are an image that will stay with me forever. I darted back into the house through the front door, jumping over the ring of bugs that had been returned to the front porch. As I crossed through the doorway, the whispers stopped, but I caught a glimpse of something moving. As quickly as the whispers stopped, the laughing and the crying resumed at once. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were back. I fired the last shell I had in the gun at the nearest tree line and turned around and looked to where I had just come from. I wish I hadn't made that particular mistake. I should have saved it for the people standing on my car.